Okay, so the Bears win 31-3 against the Browns. A great response after last week's result. It was a tough result last week, losing to Green Bay. But what a response from this team, which they keep doing pretty much every week. Leading up to the game, we were hearing about the weather conditions were going to make a massive factor. Personally, I thought it was going to be quite a rough game to play. Thought it was
Hmm.
going to be quite run heavy, and we were just kind of going to just try and get that win, and that was all that mattered. However, Caleb Williams just ripped that up and just performed outstandingly. That
Yeah.
touchdown pass to DJ Moore was just unbelievable. I thought it was intercepted, and I screamed. And
Yeah.
then, I mean, it was just unbelievable, wasn't it? It was just like it was the end zone was just full of Browns. He gets the ball to him, and it was just
Yeah.
yeah, unbelievable.
And when I saw like some like a clip of the from the all 22 and DJ wasn't even in the frame yet when he threw the ball, so it was just absolutely crazy.
It was in the Fox Sports footage where it was just from the bottom of the end zone, wasn't it? And it was just like
Yeah.
that's ridiculous, like
Yeah.
unreal. Like leading up to the game, obviously there was like these media outlets that were coming out saying that Saunders was going to outperform Caleb, which obviously Caleb
Yeah.
responded in big fashion. He completely
Yeah.
smashed him. Defense completely shut him down. Three interceptions, five sacks, and only 3 points allowed. And that Johnson interception was just unbelievable. He didn't even see the ball. He wasn't. He had his back to it, intercepted
Yeah.
it, basically taking it off him. That was probably like one of the play of the day after obviously
Right.
the DJ.
Yeah.
Um, but all three elements was good. Offense was good. Defense was good. Special teams was good in terms of pinning them down, getting good
Yeah.
returning.
Yeah.
However, Santos, who we're going to talk
Yeah.
about probably in a bit. Um, but the Bears win. Green Bay Lions lose. Sets up Saturday very nicely against Green Bay.
Yes.
But I'm going to introduce you today to Sarah, who works for Windy City Gridiron. Thank you so much for coming on. Just your initial thoughts on a really dominant performance from the Bears.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I felt like they had one of their most, if not their most complete games of the season. All three phases, like you said, really showed up and, took advantage of, just making sure that the, game was in their hands, and be able to dominate against the Browns. I think this was probably the best game of Caleb's career thus far. He just looked really comfortable in the pocket. Um, and I mean, they, a first, opening drive wasn't great, but I mean, it seemed to pick up shortly after that, which was great since they had, have been some troubles getting started early on. And yeah, I mean, I think that the past like couple weeks, the teams just look really different. And they, had looked just, Ben Johnson said that they would be playing their best football in December, and I think that that's held really true. And they have just looked, even with the loss last week, I mean, they still in the second half looked like a completely different team than the team we saw from the beginning of the season. So great win. And of course, people will say, oh, it's the Browns, but the defense, did what they were supposed to do, and the offense was, playing against the top passing defense in the league, and they still outperformed them. So you can't apologize for wins in this league. So
100%. Like, how surprised were you with Caleb's performance? Because, like I said, the conditions were just like, as an Englishman, we moan about the weather, but obviously
yeah,
it's just a different level in Chicago, definitely. And
yeah,
you all you heard was it's going to be kind of a running game, and then Caleb, just like you
yeah.
said, had his best game for the Bears. Like, were you surprised with that? Did you think we are going to run it more? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so honestly, I feel like Ben's game plan obviously is very tailored to like the defense and that they're going up against. And so I think like every week it's kind of a surprise or like kind of a toss up whether it's going to be pass heavy or if it's going to be run heavy or if it's going to be balanced in, in terms of the offense. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that I wasn't terribly surprised. I think that Caleb has just continued to ascend. I know at the like beginning to like middle of the season, it felt like it was more up and down every game. But like I said earlier, I do think that this team has just looked so much stronger. And I hope to continue seeing him really put it together every week. I mean, I think that there was a good combination with the run game, helping him out and not putting as much pressure on the passing game. So overall, I mean, the weather seemed like it didn't really impact them very much, which I think that last week, playing the Packers, it seemed to be more of a factor, or, maybe the defensive plan was kind of um thrown up in the air, after Kyler Gordon injured himself and, workout. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that it's going to just kind of be a surprise every week of what the offense is going to come out there and do. And I think that that's great because it keeps, opponent on their toes and not sure what to game plan for.
Yeah, just like sticking to the offense. So with Caleb, you hear about his completion rate all the time from the
Mhm.
outside, don't you? I think the Bear fans like us are kind of a bit more like, I'd rather him throw it away than try and get the
Yeah.
interceptions.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
keeps getting brought up, doesn't it? And when you saw the
Yeah.
stat, I think you saw you retweet it or whatever it's called nowadays. 12 interceptions in 1,000
Yeah.
career passing attempts. I mean, what's your overall impression of Caleb? Are you happy with his development? Because I certainly am.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. He, he's really come out there and obviously his sack avoidance has been significantly better than last season. And I think that's been great. I think that he is trusting his offensive line a little bit more, trusting just himself and having more confidence overall. And I think, to your point about the completion percentage, most people just look at the number and they don't consider the throwaways. And, there's been a lot of drops this season. And I think, I mean, of course, that plays into it as well. So I think that a lot of people have been fixating on the completion percentage because at the beginning of the season, Ben Johnson said his goal for Caleb was to reach 70% completion. But that's just a goal and it's a lofty one. Most quarterbacks in the league aren't hitting even 70%. So, and Caleb had a good completion percentage against the Browns as well. So, I'm not super concerned about it if, we go into next season and it's still, at that, the lower end of 60, then, maybe it's a for concern at that point, but I don't think that it's fair to jump to like conclusions at this point. And just be happy that you're seeing a lot of progress from him and that he's looking better every week.
Yeah, 100%. I hate to get negative over a game like that, but I got to mention Santos because he is
Yeah,
getting a bit of flack from the fans, including myself. I've got to
yeah,
admit. Um, Obviously, I don't think we're going to do anything this season. Do you
yeah,
think next season we've got to look for a new kicker? Because I mean, you see what the kickers can do in the NFL nowadays. It's like
yeah,
ridiculous. And when he's struggling
right,
to kind of hit a 35-yarder,
right,
I know it didn't matter in the end, but if he gets to the
yeah,
playoffs, we've got to trust him, don't we? And do
right.
you think we've got to go elsewhere in the off season?
It's hard because I looked it up and he has a 95% kick percentage when it comes to extra points. So, he's very reliable there, but I do think that, the field goals it's frustrating because he's inconsistent. He misses a 35-yard field goal, which is routine. It should be a routine kick to make. But then the next one's 41 yards and he makes that one. So it's been a little bit inconsistent this season. And I remember having like concerns about it at the end of last season as well, because it was less frequent, with the missed field goals or missed extra point, but it was still kind of like as the end of the season, as the games stacked up, it seemed like it started to get more common for him to miss. And, I was at I was at Soldier Field when the Bears in 2018 when they played the wild card against the NFC wild card against the Eagles. And I'm not saying that this is going to be the same thing. But of course, Cody Parkey that season he struggled and had, some misses and it ended up costing us in the playoffs. So again, I'm not saying that's going to happen or it's to that point or anything, but it is concerning when like you're like holding your breath as like the kick is like the ball is like in the air and you're like, is it gonna go through? What's gonna happen? So I'm not really sure. I feel like the coaching staff has, and maybe they're just saying this, but the coaching staff's made it very clear that they have confidence in him. And, at least that was what they said in like the beginning or middle of the season. So yeah, I feel like I would want a new kicker, but then, the grass isn't always greener. So I am kind of, up in the air, or at least I see both sides of the argument. So,
Yeah, I definitely think there should be competition. That's for sure. Like,
yeah.
I think it made it worse. I hope I say his name right. Moody, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He came in and he did a really good job, and I think that put more pressure on him as well. A bit, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, Green Bay coming up on Saturday. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about the injuries for Green Bay.
Yeah.
Um, what are your thoughts? Are you feeling confident, or are you a bit concerned still because of how the defense played last time?
Yeah. So I think that things are different now with those injuries for the Packers. But I still, no one should be underestimating them or, I know that Ben Johnson won't be and he'll, come prepared. I think that it'll really depend on like the offensive line because to me, the first half of, the last game with the Packers, that, the offensive line was not, playing up to par, and that put a ton of pressure on Caleb. He had no time to throw. And once that got cleaned up in the second half, we saw a completely different team. So, if Caleb play that way again and the offensive line and Caleb can just, do that in the first half and, do it throughout the whole game, I think we have a real chance, and it obviously is very helpful that we're going to be at home. And I think, there's a ton at stake for this game, the division, playoffs, so it's at that point in the season where even one loss, I don't think one loss would cost us because we would still have the chance to win the other two. But it would be nice to go into those last two games with that like padding, and just feeling a little more like not as much pressure, having a little bit more security in the fact that we'll be making playoffs. So it's a really important game, really big game. I think that there's a real shot if we can just be consistent and if all three phases can show up and we'll have, a shot there, I think. So,
Yeah, it was a weird game, wasn't it? Because it was a game of two halves on the offense. Like the first half, we just
yeah,
couldn't block him. Parsons was laughing at us basically, and then the second half, there was a picture of Parsons on the sideline
yeah,
blowing air because he was knackered, and we controlled that game really well in the second half. So if we could just repeat the second half, yeah, we've got more of a good chance. But so we're back on top of the NFC North with Green Bay, 49ers and Lions. You kind of touched on it there. So if I had to like make you bet on it, what do you think? Are we going to make the playoffs?
yeah. So, first of all, the fact that we're even having playoff conversations is just incredible under a first year, first time head coach, first year offense, entirely new coaching staff. So, to me, the season already exceeded my expectations. But it also, with that, it also raises your hopes and, wanting to, at the beginning of the season, you're like, oh, I don't think this team's making playoffs. We'll win 8 or 9 games. But then once, you're like, okay, we have 10 wins now, you are like really hoping and you got your hopes up and are wanting to make playoffs now, and knowing that this team can do that. For me, I think we will finish 12-5. Um, and that, that's the high end, of course, in my prediction. And yeah, that's kind of, I think, if we get 12 wins, we will make the playoffs. And I really hope that we win, the division as well. But if we come in second and we make playoffs, that's a great season for me. So
Yeah, 100%. So my last question for you, it's about Ben Johnson. So, I mean, last year was just shocking, wasn't it? I mean, it was grim watching. The team was flat. It was just the fans were kind of devastated. How like it's so impressive what Ben Johnson's done. He's like completely shifted the whole culture.
yeah,
Like he's got players that will punch like a hole in the wall for him. The offense is ticking so much better. Um, I mean, I remember when when we were trying to sign him, and I was like watching this. I've forgotten who it was. One of the fan pages, but they were like tracking all the Chicago airports to see if Ben Johnson was landing
yeah.
if we were signing and that. That's how much I was desperate for him to sign for us. But how impressed are you with Ben Johnson, except for taking his top off and getting everyone free hot dogs?
I mean, yeah, I think he's been as advertised, he really has just been very straightforward, no BS type of guy. I think that the player buy-in that he has created or, kind of gotten going in this in really honestly a broken locker room after last season is just so impressive to me. And you can see it on the field. When the players step on the field that you can tell they're playing hard and they, this it matters to them. When I feel like last season, with everything that happened, it was just, the locker room is just falling apart. So I think that's huge. And I saw something today. Well, the Bears have a top five offense, now this season, and that has not happened since 1977, which is crazy. Which is the longest drought in NFL history. So, of course, this team, is always a defensive, or at least has always been a defensive minded team, at least, in more recent years. And it's just really nice to see the offense, playing really well, being in the top five, having a good run game, having a good offensive line, Caleb ascending. So, and all of that, it doesn't happen without good coaching. I think also, Ben put together a really good coaching staff as well. And I think that matters so much. So yeah, I'm really happy with him. I can't wait to see, what this team looks like in year two under him. And yeah, I think he's been great. And I am super happy with him. I think that this team had all the talent. Obviously there's holes and stuff. That's, of course. But this team had so much talent and so much untapped potential last season. And so that's why I really think that he was able to come in. He knew that this team could win. He even said it in his opening presser that, they were ready to win now, and he did not disappoint. And just one other comment, I think when you take a look at Aaron Glenn and what's going on with the Jets, it's a very different situation there. But I also think that he inherited a significantly worse situation. So I'm super impressed with Ben. I think he's been everything that, all of the hype around him in the off season, he's, surpassed that. So it's been great. And I am super happy and excited for the future with this team. So
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, you just got to look down the hallway, don't you? Dennis Allen, like obviously he couldn't really make it as a top head coach, but his what he's done with that defense is just unbelievable, really, especially with all the injuries as well. But no, but thank you so much for coming on. And hopefully we'll be celebrating making the playoffs.
yes, definitely. Thanks so much for having me on and bear down.